So we're going to continue working with these algebraic ideas, and now we're going to talk about multiplying and dividing rational expressions. Now, rational expression just means there's a variable in the denominator of my fraction. But again, I have an expression, not an equation, so things can't disappear. They always have to be factored and canceled appropriately. So number one in red, huge, is never, ever, ever cancel next to a plus or minus sign. Okay, it always has to be multiplication. So we always change it to multiplication first. And the way we do that is by factoring. So your first step when you see these is lock these up in parentheses. A fraction bar really means division. And so that implies the parentheses. So we have to divide before we do anything else, before we add or subtract. So you cannot come in here and cancel these 24s because those are part of that subtraction problem. That's what I'm saying here. Never, ever, ever. Nor can I take out a 2 or an 8 from the 40 and the 16. I can't do that. So if I lock those parentheses, now I know parentheses have to happen first. So number one, put your parentheses in, and then we are going to factor the numerator and the denominator. So that work we just did, you're going to get more practice. Number one step of factoring is greatest common factor. And if we have trinomials, then we do our grouping, factoring. So here I just have binomials, two terms. I'm looking for greatest common factors. In 24r minus 40, my greatest common factor is an 8, and that leaves me 3r minus 5. In the bottom, I also have a greatest common factor of 8, and that leaves me 3r minus 2. And we pull those out by division. Now that this is multiplication, I've changed it to multiplication. 8 divided by 8 is 1, so that cancels. But these 3r minus 5 and 3r minus 2 are locked in parentheses, so I can't cancel anymore there. And so this is my final answer. Okay, that is the final answer. If I go on to homework problem number 20, I have a much more complicated looking problem. But again, go in, these are all single numbers. And before I can do any canceling, I need to factor. So I can't cancel 4 or factor anything out of 4b, but in this next one, my greatest common factor would be 8b. And when I take that out, I'm left with b plus 3. And it is okay to write this all as a single fraction. Now this work you may want to do off to the side. So to factor b squared plus 5b plus 6, I need to change that into b squared plus something plus 6, that grouping idea. Factors of 6 are going to be 1 and 6, 2 and 3. The only way to make a positive 5 with those numbers is to have a positive 2b and a positive 3b. So I group. Greatest common factor in the first one is b, and that leaves me b plus 2. Greatest common factor in the second is 3, and that leaves me b plus 2. Now this is a greatest common factor, so that comes out, and it leaves b plus 3. Now all of this needs to replace this. So I'm going to write b plus 2 times b plus 3 and 8b. So I haven't done any real work. I've just factored. Now I can go in and cancel. And 8b divided by 8b will cancel. That is 1. The entire expression of b plus 3 and b plus 3 will cancel, leaving 1. And what do I have left? I have 4b over b plus 2. B plus 2 is in parentheses. I cannot cancel the 4 or the b and the 2. So that is your answer. If we go on and look at number 27 in your homework, we're going to switch to dividing. And the only thing there is when we divide fractions, you actually multiply by the reciprocal. So we are going to flip the second fraction over and change it to multiplication. So we're going to have n plus 3 over n plus 2. That's the first fraction. Second fraction is n minus 3 times n squared plus n minus 6. So now I'm back to multiplication, which is the previous section, which means I have to factor. Now this n squared plus n minus 6 has to factor, so I'm just going to go off to the side here. And I'm just going to say the factors of 6 that we're going to add or subtract to make 1n. Now, the only way that that can happen is if I have a negative 3n and a positive 2n. Go ahead and group the first two, group the second two. Greatest common factor is n. Greatest common factor is 2. We know the world is good when this back is the same, so that becomes my greatest common factor, and it leaves n plus 2. So I'm going to go back up here and I'm going to rewrite this as its two factors, n minus 3, n plus 2. Now I have everything all factored. I can go ahead and cancel. I have an n minus 3 cancels with n minus 3. Nothing else cancels because we can only cancel numerator to denominator because we're really dividing, and that makes 1. So I have n plus 3 all over n plus 2 times n plus 2. And that is your final answer. And that is how you multiply and divide rational expressions. So it hinges heavily on the factoring from section 2. Good luck with your homework.